Hi guys. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you guys about making wagon wheel cookies. Some people call these chocolate crinkles. The recipe that I have calls it wagon wheel cookies, but probably chocolate crinkles is, more popular. So the first thing I'm going to do before I even get started is I am going to get my eggs into this measuring cup. Now you might wonder, why is she putting her eggs in a measuring cup? It's because they're cold and they need to be at room temperature. Usually, when you bake with eggs, they should be at room temperature. These are not. I just took them out of the fridge, but I want to get started. So a good way to get these to room temperature quickly, put them in a bowl or like a measuring cup or something where they can be completely covered in water. And I'm just gonna put warm water in them so that or on them so that when I'm ready to use them, they will be room temperature. I'm just going to set them off to the side. The next thing that I'm going to do is I am going to get my unsweetened baking chocolate melted. So the recipe tells me to use a double boiler. So you guys might be wondering, what is a double boiler? Well, this is a double boiler. So if you look, you can see that it's 2 pans in one. This bottom pan is the one that you just put a little bit of water in, and the top pan is the one that you're going to put your chocolate in. So the water and the chocolate never touch. Actually, your water doesn't even touch the bottom of the pan that has the chocolate in it. So why do we do that? Chocolate's pretty delicate and it burns very quickly. So you want to put it in a pan where it's not directly touching the heat. And if you don't have a double boiler, an easy thing that you could do, just get a regular saucepan like this. Get a glass bowl that says that it's heat proof or microwave safe. And you're just going to set it inside your pan. And that's it. So this is going to get about 1 inch of water. Your chocolate's going to go in here. And you're going to melt it slowly and gently. Okay. Your other option would be to put it in the microwave. If you do that, that's totally fine. Make sure you have a microwave safe bowl that you're using. And you're going to want to make sure that you take it out every 30 seconds and stir it. Otherwise, it will burn. It's happened before in the kitchen. It smells horrible. And you don't want to waste chocolate because it can add up, if you keep burning it. So I'm just breaking this into chunks so that it melts faster. Another thing you need to be careful of with chocolate is that you don't let the water touch it. If the water touches the chocolate, it does something called seizing, and it will just get clumpy. It'll, clump into, a clump, I guess, and there's no coming back from that. You can't fix the chocolate after it's touched water, so you'd have to start over. Okay, so I melted my chocolate. I actually set it off to the side so it could cool to room temperature before we add it to our mix. So while we're waiting for that to happen, I'm going to be mixing my dry ingredients together in a smaller bowl, this glass bowl here. So I'm going to use 2.5 cups of flour. So when you're making cookies, your flour actually is the main ingredient that is your structure. It's usually what's going to keep your whole cookie together, it's no different for this cookie. So remember, when you're measuring flour, you don't want to pack it in. I've honestly never seen a recipe where it says to pack the flour in. So you just want to kind of lightly scoop it. You can even use a spoon to scoop it up. And you can either level it off with a butter knife. My canister right here actually has a leveler, so I just use that. So there's one. Like fluff it a little bit, as I measure to make sure that it's not packed in there. 2 and so this cookie actually kind of ends up being like a brownie cookie. It's very rich, it's heavy, it's dense, it's delicious. One of the reasons why it ends up being like that is because our fat in the cookie is oil, it's not butter. Butter is what you would use if you want a fluffier cookie, and oil is what you would use if you want a denser cookie. So the next thing I'm going to add is 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So baking powder, does anybody know what baking powder is? When you're making cookies, it starts with an L. Okay, it's called a leavening agent or a leavener. It's what makes your cookies rise. So baking powder actually makes cookies puff up. If I were to use baking soda in this, that would make the cookies spread. Soda spreads, powder puffs. If you've had me for baking and pastry arts, you've heard this before, and hopefully you remember that. So that's what baking powder does in this, and that's why we use it in cookies, cakes, muffins, breads, that kind of thing. We are going to use half a teaspoon of salt. So salt is going to help, it does a couple things. It's going to help counteract the sweetness of the cookie. And the other thing that it does is it makes your gluten stronger in your cookie. So gluten is a protein that you get from just regular wheat flour, and they are strands. They are protein strands in the flour. So as you mix your flour with some kind of liquid, and the more you mix, the more your gluten forms and it gets stronger and it combines together. And that's what keeps your cookies from falling apart. So salt works with gluten, it makes it stronger. So now I'm going to whisk these together. The reason why is because you don't want to end up with like a big clump of baking powder in a cookie. You want it to be evenly distributed throughout the cookie dough. Okay, so that is whisked together. I'm going to set it off to the side. Okay, so I'm going to start adding my liquid ingredients or wet ingredients together. So this is going to get half a cup of oil. Vegetable oil works well because it has a really mild flavor. I probably would not use olive oil just because that works better for things that are savory. You know, like if you're making spaghetti or something. So remember when you measure things, you want to get down at eye level and really make sure that you actually have the right amount. And it's a good thing I did that because this is actually way more than half a cup. And it looked like half a cup from where I was standing. But baking is a science and you have to be pretty exact with it. Okay, perfect. So we're at a half a cup. So usually sugar gets added in with your wet ingredients, and this is no different. We're going to be adding the sugar into this. So we're going to be adding the oil, the chocolate, and the sugar together. So we're going to add 2 cups of sugar in here. Now, white sugar you really can't pack in, so you don't have to worry about how you're measuring it. But make sure that it's not mounded over the top because you don't want extra. 2 cups of sugar for these cookies is already actually quite a bit. And the sugar is also going to add to that dense quality in the cookies, like to make it more brownie-like and fudgy. Okay, so I'm gonna add my chocolate into here. So this is 4 ounces. It's one of those bars of baking chocolate. You really want to make sure you get as much as you can. So if you have a rubber spatula or scraper, use that. This is a silicone one. I actually like it a lot because the whole thing has the silicone coating, even the handle, which means I can put it in the dishwasher. If it had a metal handle, I would not be able to do that. You can, but it's not good for the wood. So I do not recommend it. Okay. So I'm just going to mix these together. And then I'll show you guys what that looks like. So the chocolate obviously is going to give it flavor. And one of the reasons why we had to add so much sugar is because we used unsweetened baking chocolate, so it's not already sweet. And I don't know if you've ever had chocolate that hasn't been sweetened before with sugar, but it's very bitter and it's not what you would normally think of when you think of chocolate. It's not milk chocolate like a Hershey's bar or like a Kit Kat or anything. So to get rid of that bitter flavor that you would get from the chocolate, you need sugar. Okay, so now all it looks like is like brown sand. Okay, and that is what it should look like right now. Okay, so I'm switching over to my wooden spoon now because the next thing I'm going to do is start adding the eggs one at a time. So after each addition, after each egg, you are going to mix it until it's incorporated. And that a spatula is just not strong enough for that. So you could use a hand mixer at this point if you want, but I like using a spoon. You could also use a stand mixer if you have one. So this is a cookie that you need to have a little bit of planning going into it because you actually are going to need to refrigerate the cookie dough before you can bake it. And that's because it's a pretty wet, sticky dough. When you have a dough like that, if you don't refrigerate it beforehand, the cookies are just going to spread a ton and they're going to end up being like pancake cookies instead of like a nice round cookie. So eggs. Who knows why we add eggs into cookies? I'll give you guys a chance to think about that. Okay, so the reason why you're going to add egg into cookies, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, it acts as a binding agent, which means it keeps all of your ingredients together so they don't fall apart when you bite into it. So it's a binding agent. The other reason, another reason why you're going to add eggs is because eggs have fat in them. The yolk has a lot of fat. That is going to make them tender. And they also add moisture because they're liquid. So there's a couple of reasons why you add eggs to baked goods. It's actually starting to kind of look like a cake batter almost right now. It kind of smells like it too, or a brownie batter. All right, we're gonna add 2 teaspoons of vanilla to this. We're done with our eggs. Vanilla is just, it's an extract and it's going to help add some flavor in there along with the chocolate. Vanilla goes in a lot of baked goods. If it's not vanilla, sometimes people use things like almond extract, which is really good if you like almonds. So now that I'm done with my wet ingredients, I'm going to add my dry ingredients to this bowl. So first, let me show you guys what it looks like before I add my dry ingredients. Okay, so it kind of looks like a brownie batter almost. It's a little bit runnier than a brownie batter. Here are my dry ingredients. Okay, so I'm just going to add them in, mix it up, and then it needs to be refrigerated for at least a couple hours before you form them into balls. So I'm being gentle with this just because I don't want the flour to go all over the place. But I will show you guys what these look like when I'm done mixing. Okay, so let me show you guys what this looks like. It doesn't look like a typical cookie dough. It's more almost like a batter, which is why you need to put it in the refrigerator. So if you look, you can see how sticky it looks and how it's kind of dripping off of my spoon. So it definitely needs to go in the refrigerator. So I'm going to do that for a couple hours. I'm going to cover it, put it in the fridge. If you wanted it to go faster, you could put it in the freezer, but then the inside might not get cold while the outside starts to freeze. So probably the refrigerator is a better option, even though it takes longer. Okay, so we are going to finish up these crinkle cookies. I have my oven preheating to 350 degrees right now, and the recipe says to grease the cookie sheets. So there's a couple things you could do. You can spray them with cooking spray. You can just put a light coating of Crisco on it. What I'm going to do is use my silicone baking mats, which look like this. So I'm just going to put these right on top of my baking sheets. And then I'm going to put the cookies on here. They're non-stick, so cookies don't stick to them. If you have parchment paper, that would work too. And it also saves on cleanup because you can just throw the parchment away. So I'm going to use my cookie scoop, and I'm going to scoop out some of my cookie dough. And then I have a cup of powdered sugar here in a bowl. So after I roll my cookies into balls, into perfectly round balls, I'm going to roll them in the powdered sugar. And then I'm going to place them on my cookie sheet about 2 inches apart. So I usually don't put more than 12 cookies on a cookie sheet because if you do, they spread and they start to touch each other. And then they're just not as pretty. So this was in the fridge for a little bit. And it had a chance to, get a little bit harder. So it's still going to be a little sticky though. So you want to keep that in mind when you're doing this. Okay, so I have a ball of batter here. So I'm going to take that and just gently roll it, because if you do it too hard, it's going to really get stuck to your hands. So you're almost using, like it's a meatball. Okay, then I'm going to take it in my powdered sugar, and you could even just toss it around in there until it's fully coated. And then that's it. So they almost look like the donut holes that you buy at the store before you put them in the oven, right? They're all coated and pretty looking. If you didn't want to scoop these up individually to roll them, you could just scoop a whole bunch at once and set them off to the side, then roll them. So that's it. Super easy. Just take some time before you start and make sure that you plan, because they're going to have to be refrigerated for a little bit. But this is also something where you could take the dough, roll it up, and then freeze them. So I would probably put them on the sheet, put them in the freezer on the cookie sheet, put them in the freezer so that they freeze separately. Then you could put them in like a gallon-sized freezer bag. And then when you're ready, just put them in the fridge to thaw. And then before you bake them, just roll them in your powdered sugar, put them in the oven. So this is something you could make ahead. I probably would not freeze the dough more than a month personally. They say you can freeze things up to 3 months, but especially if you roll them into little individual balls, because there's more contact with the freezer. So that's it. They're easy, they're good, everybody likes them. So I hope you guys try to make some dessert for your family this holiday season. Good luck.